Hi everyone, and welcome to the Coaching with Emily podcast. In this podcast, I will be talking about something which has truly changed my life and which was the foundational skill I learned in curing my depression years ago. This is something I continue to do every day, which is the practice of gratitude. In this podcast, you will be walking away with new and profound knowledge, tools, concepts, and possibly a new view on gratitude, which you may have not heard of before. And with this new view, tools and concepts and knowledge, you can use this to change your mindset. Later on, I'll also be sharing an easy gratitude practice you can do at home, which only takes a minute of your time to practice daily gratitude, which this task I will teach you has been scientifically studied and proven to rewire your brain into becoming more enthusiastic, to decrease anxiety and depression, and increase your daily focus. Now, without further ado, let's dive into today's podcast. Hi, my name is Emily and welcome to the Coaching with Emily podcast. I am studying to be a life coach and a breathwork facilitator, and I will be sharing my journey and concepts I have learned and continue to learn with you in my podcasts. In the Coaching with Emily podcast, I also talk about everything personal development in the practical and spiritual sense. I am so happy you're here and I'm so excited you tuned in to follow my personal growth and personal development journey. My goal is to help guide you on the path to live your best life, being the best version of yourself possible. All right, love, let's dive in. All right, so what comes to mind when I mention the word gratitude to you? What things do you think of, and what comes to mind when I say gratitude? If you were to ask me what comes to mind when I think of gratitude years ago, I can't even remember, maybe like 6 or 7 years ago when I was in my deep depression where I felt like a piece of trash on the side of the road had more worth than me. If you were to ask me then what I thought of gratitude, I would have probably rolled my eyes and said, being grateful for the things in your life, but what can I be grateful for in this moment when all the bad things going on by far times a million outweigh all the good things happening in my life? And when you're in that state of depression and anxiety and just not having a good time in life, not living your best life, it can be really hard to see the good in your life and to see the positives and to be grateful for the little things in your life. I get it. I've been there. I've done that. And not only that, but us as humans, it is so natural of us to just, when people ask us how our day has been or how it's going, it's very easy for us straight away to cling to the bad things that have happened in our day. And this is something called trauma bonding, where because you receive more sympathy and you receive more attention from people when you express the more negative things which have happened within your day. Because when we do that, we do receive more attention and more sympathy, and we can connect to people more because a lot more people have more things in common with the things that they dislike versus the things that they like. So a lot of the time, instead of expressing gratitude for things, we do look for the negatives that happen throughout our day. But this can be changed, which is something which I will talk about later in this podcast, of how you can change and rewire your brain into not doing that and to actually physically go out without even consciously doing it, but unconsciously or subconsciously going out in your day-to-day and actually looking and finding for things to be grateful for. Now, this podcast today and what I'll be talking about in this podcast was actually inspired by a book that I'm currently reading by Hugh Van Cuylenburg, and the book is called The Resilience Project: Finding Happiness Through Gratitude, Empathy, and Mindfulness. Now, this book was lended to me by my boyfriend's friend, who found this book extremely helpful and changed his life for the positive and made him completely rethink his daily tasks. And he went from feeling, not so great about his day-to-day to now finding gratitude in the small things. So, and this book has been highly rated by so many people. It has been read by footy players, a lot of Australian athletes. And this book has been a national bestseller as well. And it has been Reviewed by Missy Higgins as hilarious, inspiring, and heartbreakingly vulnerable, this book has the potential to be life-changing. And I'm only halfway through the book at the moment, and I'm finding it very life-changing. So in Hugh's book, The Resilience Project, Hugh mentions a story of an experience that he had whilst living in India with his girlfriend at the time. And I want to share this story with you guys because I found it really inspiring and beautiful, and I don't know, it just gave me a little bit of a tingle in my heart. So I wanted to share it with you guys. I think it's just such a beautiful perspective on gratitude and a beautiful lesson in this. So what happened was Hugh and his girlfriend at the time moved to India, North India in Mumbai. And for those of you who don't know, Hugh was a school teacher when he was living in Australia. And so when they moved to Mumbai in North India for a little while, him and his girlfriend at the time volunteered at this school. So if you're a kid in India and you're going to school, you are considered one of the lucky ones and very privileged to be even going to a school. Hugh mentions in his book that he walked past a school, and to Hugh it looked like a dilapidated timber building that was barely clinging to the banks of the polluted river that ran through the city. And he said that although it looked as though it would eventually slide off its foundations and sink into the murky grey water, 130 children aged around 5 to 16 were crammed inside and sat on the floor facing a blackboard. There was only one teacher on duty, and it looked like she ruled the board into 5 columns. She was in the process of teaching 5 lessons at once from kindergarten right through to year 10. He also mentions that in an Australian school, it would be fair to expect this approach to result in some noisy disruption at best, or chaos at worst. But there wasn't a word in this teacher's classroom. She had the children's complete attention because the children knew how lucky they were to be at the school. So after Hugh saw this school, him and his girlfriend at the time decided to volunteer at one of the schools, considering that Hugh's profession was school teaching and being a school teacher. So they found a school to volunteer at, and Hugh mentions in his book that the floors, like these buildings are not structured buildings. They're quite run down for these schools. It's generally just like the one classroom, and there's dirt floor, like it's all dirt floor. There's no table and chairs. The kids are sitting on the floor. The kids can't even afford to bring lunch to school, or their parents can't afford to bring lunch to school. So the school has to provide rice, just plain rice for their lunch and everything. So as Hugh is volunteering at this school in North India, he meets this child, Stanzin, who really melts his heart and really takes his heart. And Hugh mentions that within 10 minutes of being in Stanzin's presence, he felt this irradiation of joy and happiness from him. And Hugh was really fascinated as to why this child of such poverty was so happy and just radiating happiness and joy and just found just everything. So after studying and observing Stanzin's behaviour to figure out how this child was so happy, Hugh noted and studied 3 things that he noticed Stanzin do every day. And this was 1, gratitude, 2, empathy, and 3, mindfulness. And at the start of the school day, all the kids would do a meditation at the start of class. And this was not compulsory. This was optional for the kids to do, and every single kid would do it. So Stanzin would stop and show Hugh all of his favourite things which he loved, which sounds like a normal child thing to do, right? To say, look at all my toys, look at all the things I have, isn't this cool? But Stanzin did it in a way that Hugh had never seen before. And it would be the smallest things as well. Like Stanzin would be tying up his shoelace and he'd be pointing at his shoes to Hugh, and he couldn't pronounce the word this because English was his 3rd language, so it was hard for him to pronounce the TH. So he would say this, look at this. And so Stanzen would be tying his shoelace and he'd look up at Hugh and say, look at this, look at this. And what he was saying is, how lucky am I to have shoes on my feet? And because the kids couldn't afford to take the food to school and the school provided rice, Stanzen would say, look, this, pointing at his rice bowl, saying, how lucky am I to have this lunch provided for me? And when he was having fun with his friends at playtime at school, he'd talk to Hugh and point to all his friends and say, look, this friend, this person, this person, this person. How, like, he was so grateful for all of his friends. And Hugh was walking past the playground once and the kids were all pointing at the playground. And Hugh mentions in his book that the playground was so rusty and run down and there was only one swing and a seesaw, which he said looked like something that you would see in a junkyard back home because it was so run down. But yeah, the kids would find the most creative games and activities to do on this little playground. And Hugh was walking by and he said that all the kids were pointing at this playground going, look at this, look at this, look at this. And at first Hugh thought that they were saying, look at how miserable this playground is. That doesn't even work. But then he soon realized that these kids were saying, look at this, look how cool it is that we have this playground. And there was once where he walked past the playground one morning and a boy said, hey, sir, in your country, do children in schools get the same play equipment that we have? And Hugh's initial thought of the response he wanted to give was going to be like, yeah, of course we do, mate. We've got these huge ovals and basketball courts and playgrounds with slides and heaps of swings and all this stuff. But instead of saying that, Hugh said, yeah, we do. We do. The kids in my country do have playgrounds like what you do. The little boy responded saying, that makes me happy. And then he jumped off and ran to his classroom. I don't know about you, but I found that story so heart-touching and so beautiful that this little boy was so, not only that are these kids so grateful for all the things and utilities and all this stuff that they have, but they're also so excited and happy that other people get to experience that stuff as well. And I find it so fascinating that people in the Western world, the depression and anxiety and the suicide rate is the most high in all over the world. More than these third world countries, the suicide rate and the depression, everything is so much higher. And I believe there's so many different reasons as to why this is true. But I believe, just part of what I believe is that in Western culture, we've been conditioned to always reach for the next thing and to strive for the next thing. I also feel like it's very live to work, not work to live, rather than the opposite. And I also feel like it's because we're taught to always thrive and want more and more. And I feel like this is very heavily manipulated by the media, by the news, by social media, all that stuff. Like, I definitely think those things have a time and a place and can be very positive, but there's also a very dark side to them, especially the news, because the news here is constantly showing us and telling us all the negative and bad things which are going on in the world and in our country, and it very rarely focuses on the good things going on. So my best advice is to just stop watching the news. I don't watch it. I mean, if it's important enough and if it's big enough news where it impacts me, or if it's something where I can make a change in this world or incorporate something, then I'm sure that I will find out about it. But other than that, I do not watch the news. And if it's something which is out of my control, like people being murdered and things happening in the world, unless I can play a part somehow, like taking care of the environment, for example, and climate change, like I can do my part in little bits. But when it comes to big things, which I can't actually do anything about, what is the point of watching it on the news and stressing myself out and getting myself in that mind space where I'm feeling very sad for this other person, which I cannot help? This does obviously depend on what it is it's talking about, but 99% of the time, the stuff on the news is irrelevant to you. And how can we be grateful and show appreciation for and gratitude for the world that we live in when we're constantly being shown everything that's wrong with it by the news and the media? It's irrelevant. There's nothing you can do about it, and it's just feeding you manipulation and negativity. So instead of doing that, why don't you do something to more utilize your time and be more proactive and productive with your time? Like read a good book or put on a good, happy, positive movie, or I don't know, something which lifts the mood. Going back to Hugh's book and his story, gratitude is so important. And these kids in India, they don't see what we see, even though they're in a third world country and we're in a first world country. They are taught to just live in the moment and be mindful. And I think there's a lot of beauty in that. And I would so love, one of my goals is to visit all these countries one day, all the third worlds and second worlds, first, like I want to go everywhere, but especially the third world countries, because I want to learn more about their culture and their mindfulness. And I mean, if I can help them in any way I can, then obviously I will. But to be mindful with them. And going back to gratitude, it's scientifically proven that when you are experiencing the emotion of gratitude, you cannot simultaneously experience any negative emotion. There was a study done by Martin Seligman who studied over 6,000 participants of the positive effects of gratitude interventions. And in his studies, he discovered that to feel more happiness and cultivate happiness within your life, all you need to do is at the end of every day is write down 3 things that went well in your day. That's it. It only takes a minute or a few minutes of your time, and it's something so simple. And these don't need to be really big things that happened and exciting things that happened in your day either. They just need to be simple things. I mean, if you had a really exciting thing happen in your day, definitely include that, but they just need to be simple things. Like how I mentioned at the start of this podcast, if you're going through a period in your life where you're not feeling that great about yourself, or not feeling, like you're feeling quite depressed, where all the bad things in your life by far outweigh any of the good things, all you need to do is write down some 3 small things which went well in your day. And this can be as simple as that first cup of coffee in the morning, or when your dog gets really excited to see you when you come home, or being able to have a hot shower at the beginning or end of your day, having a nice cozy bed to cuddle into at the end of the night, for your girlfriend or boyfriend, or for being able to afford to put food on the table. They can be such simple things. And what the studies found, that when these participants wrote down 3 things at the end of every day of the 3 things that went well in their day, they noticed that as they started to go about their everyday lives, instead of looking for the negatives and feeling down about the negatives, the studies found that in their everyday lives, they started to walk that little bit taller and their posture got better. And as they went about their everyday lives, they started scanning their surroundings for the positives and things to look out for, to be grateful for, and things that went well in their day. And then after 6 weeks of doing this practice, the participants became more enthusiastic. Their levels of focus went up, their sleep patterns and their sleep got better, and levels of depression and anxiety went down. So as you can imagine, if you implement this into your everyday life, for a few days you're going to notice a difference, and then 6 weeks you're going to notice an even more difference and impact in your life. And then a year, 2 years, it's going to be better and better, where you don't even need to write the things down anymore, because every day as you're going about your day, you're just seeing and picking things out of your day that in the moment, not only is this teaching you to have more gratitude for things, but it's also teaching you to become more present, because as you practice this, it's not going to be something you have to do. It's just something that you do. And that in your everyday, as you're going about your everyday, you just notice all the little things that you're grateful for in the present moment, which this obviously will get you out of your depression, out of your anxiety, out of your funk, and you will just be present, and this will cultivate happiness within your life. So that brings us to the end of this podcast. I really, really hope that you found value in today's podcast. And if you did find it valuable and helpful for you, please share it amongst your friends and family and people that you know, so this can also value and help them in their life. And if you could also rate this podcast, that would also mean the world to me. I don't know if you can hear that, but my cat is currently scratching at the door to get in. So that is my cue to go. If we're not yet friends on Instagram, give me a follow. My handle is coaching_with_Emily. And I hope that you have a beautiful rest of your day wherever you are in the world. And I look forward to seeing you and hanging out in my next podcast. Bye, everyone.